Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this episode of Luck is Not a Strategy. I'm your host, Matthew Von Trapp, and in this second in the series of 10 videos, we are exploring what is wrong with the construction industry. In this episode, we'll examine the typical business model used on large construction programs and identify some of the major gaps, overlaps, and non-standard business practices. Before we get started, it's noteworthy that this business model peaked in the 1980s, and even if some of the sub-processes benefit from technologies like BIM, the entire value stream has remained very much the same with very little improvements. It is a painful and inefficient business model. The backbone of the construction value stream is design, build, certify, and operate. Rarely, if ever, is it executed that way, with super smart construction engineers pushing to do design and build concurrently, using the excuse that schedule is most important. Well, we've already seen that they never meet their schedule, so don't fall for that one if you're a client hoping to achieve program excellence. With most construction teams focused on only the design and build portions, delivery is usually messy and marked by construction engineers trying to understand delivery requirements. As a quick comparison, let's look at the process for buying a home or a car. The car dealer or real estate agent knows all the paperwork, information, and physical assets that are to be delivered to the customer. But in the construction industry, the delivery process must be seemingly invented every single project, no matter how many times they've done it before. To facilitate the business model, there is a stack of organizations and quote-unquote experts to help make it work. Design organizations, PMOs, consultants, and financial planners make up the information processing layer, and site supervision consultants, prime contractors, subcontractors, and suppliers make up the material processing layer. As we dig into this structure and value stream, we see that the standard practice of beginning a construction program without a complete design translates into huge problems for the stack of organizations. So, in case you're new to construction, it is typical to begin construction without a 100% design. Actually, they usually start at what they consider to be 35%. Imagine a pilot only knowing 35% of the route, or only checking 35% of the route for weather. But all too often, the construction teams get to about 60 or 70% and realize they've left something very important out of the design. Where this problem manifests itself the most can be best viewed in light of the contractual transactions. Typically, contracts allow processing times for information, such as 7 to 14 days. So when an information transaction is initiated at either end, the response transaction may not return for 3 to 6 weeks. Additionally, because of the multiple layers, no question is simple due to delegated authority issues. For example, often lines of authority are not properly documented or delineated, leaving the middle layers to be a post office for informational transactions, where the client ends up either having to make decisions or spend extra transactional time reminding the consultants that it is their job to make the decisions. What this means is that most transactions related to information are extremely inefficient, and with only 35% of the design finalized and very little of the handover, 65% must travel through these inefficient informational pathways. One final point about this gaggle of organizations is that in contractual terms, they are adversarially positioned from the outset of the program, necessitating a robust document control system along with staff and hardware, which does not gel well with the 1980s paperwork methods the engineers use. As we look at the 8Ms, we find that the client or owner lose control of the program immediately upon contract signing, with the contractor controlling the schedule, money, quality, and most aspects of the program, and the information layer is in no way in control, instead begging for realistic updates from the contractor. Yes, the entire client organization structure is at the mercy of the contractor, again with very typical results of cost overruns, poor quality and rework, and schedule delays. The management method is not top-down, it is bottom-up, and that can be very problematic. Let's check out the 8Ms. First of all, management, as we've said, is multiple layers, and each one is designed to check the checker. The method is design on the fly with poorly established plans, which leave openings for massive variations and nonconformities. Material is owned and processed by the contractor. Manpower is hired by the construction company and is typically of a much lower education level than the information layer. Machines are owned and hired by the contractor, and political, social, economic factors are not effectively managed or considered during the program. Mental alignment is disjointed, as we've seen. Parties are contractually opposed from the outset. And money. That means purchasing, profit loss, and general drivers of cost are all controlled by the contractor. The result? Contractor owns most of the process, material, schedule, manpower, purchasing, and equipment. That is not boding well for the client. The cost of this antiquated and poorly planned and executed, I might add, system is prohibitive, resulting in large construction programs failing to meet cost, quality, or schedule targets. One interesting aspect of this whole process is the construction update meeting. At that meeting, we find 15 to 20 engineers and consultants gathering to hear the promises and excuses of the contractors so that they can position themselves contractually and send letters to each other, wasting more time and effort. The cost of these non-value-added meetings is easy to calculate. With around 20 consultants at each meeting at $100 per hour, it ends up to be about $100,000 per year. And what did the client get for their money? Well, basically, the information layer was able to find out what the material layer is doing. That is not a good business plan as we move into the future because rarely, if ever, are the schedules accurate, the budgets computable, and the quality and scope managed. The three things these so called project management companies or PMCs are supposed to be doing on behalf of the client. After listening to all of this, you may be asking yourself, how is this system ever allowed to thrive? The answer is a simple one. Clients aren't construction experts, and unfortunately, the people they choose to run the projects from the construction industry aren't business experts. So, remembering that the top of the org chart processes information and the bottom of the org chart is where the action happens, let me just briefly point out that the top needs to be the people with a business and operations background, while in the action and decision layers, they need to be the engineers and construction technical experts. Unfortunately, though, the construction engineers seem to find their way up into the top layer where they lack the business acumen and administrative skills to manage the programs effectively in the information layer. Don't worry, as we get to the videos about disruption, I'll show you that most of these layers aren't needed in the first place, and we can contain the poor business practices of the construction engineers to one layer where they will be the only ones suffering from their mistakes. Speaking of suffering, let's talk about safety. In 2014, Construction Week reported that 1 in 10 construction workers would be injured on the job that year, and that a construction worker has a 1 in 200 chance of dying if they stay on the job for an entire 45 years. That's in the United States, ladies and gentlemen. Can you even imagine what kind of statistics we're dealing with in the countries with less developed regulatory structures? The root cause of this poor safety condition is that they started without a plan, choosing instead to focus on schedule. Ironically, we see the construction industry's answer is not to correct the original problem of starting off with 35% design, but instead opting for a more inefficient and obviously ineffective safety meeting in the form of toolbox talks every day. Another add-on specialty required to mend this wayward business model is the ever-important Project Controls Department. Found in several levels of the organizations, the Project Controls Department neither has the tools nor the authority to control anything. I think it's safe to say that the business model of construction, whatever good it may have done in getting us in the infrastructure we so dearly love, has little place in the future. Well, that's all for today, folks. Next time we meet will be video 3, and we'll start to get into each of the 8 M's and the inefficiencies and ineffective and non-value added work that goes on there. And remember, once all the craziness in the construction industry is exposed, we're going to get into the disruptive business models and technologies that will put the inefficient methods out of a job and make way for exciting new progress. So stay tuned, and until then, remember that luck is not a strategy. I'm your host, Matthew Von Trapp. Thanks for tuning in.